Hi, my name is Giuliano.
My name is Natalie Rogers.
And I'm Caroline Crowley.
And our speech topic is on animation. Now, before we get into the content of our speech, we will first be showing an old iconic Disney Mickey Mouse clip that is seen in the beginning of many Disney movies. Now, what you just watched is an optical illusion, which is just one small fact about animation.
By the end of the speech, you guys will learn how animation works, what animation is, and the different types of animations that can be used.
So first things first, how does animation work?
Animation works through optical illusions by showing sequences of still images that change each time, showing the viewer the images as a consecutive image. Many filmmakers call these illusions persistence of vision. Persistence of vision works because the human eye and brain is only able to process 10 to 12 images per second. Animators can create very smooth and lifelike animations from knowing how to use persistence of vision and showing the viewer enough frames to create a sense of motion. Many and most animations have one image for every 2 frames of film. This makes it satisfactory for the viewer's eye to be able to see these animations smoothly and clearly. However, this is not the limit of humans' persistence of vision.
Next, I'll be going further into how animation works, particularly frame rates. So what are frame rates? Frame rates are still images that, when put together, make the viewer seem as if those images are in a state of motion. Each of those individual pictures is a frame rate. This matters because different frame rates have different effects on an animation. For example, 24 frames per second is what is typically used for most TV shows and movies, and while it's not shown on this image. 30 frames per second is what was used to be most used, but now that 24 frames per second is more popular, we don't use 30 frames per second anymore. 60 frames per second, you can see on the bottom, is what is typically used for slow motion videos, because having more images in each frame gives the animation a more detailed look into what the animation is doing. Next, I'll be talking about superimposement animation. Superimposement, also known as overlay, is when you layer images on top of each other to give the animation more depth and background. So, as you can see in this picture, this is the underlying image that's being used in this animation. Then these 2 images are being laid on top of it to give this picture depth and background. When animating, the underlying image typically doesn't change for most of a frame, but the overlying images do change to give the animation a sense of motion. Next, we'll be talking a little bit about the history of animation.
In 1884, William George created one of the first types of animation devices called a zoetrope. Now, a zoetrope is a type of animation that has images inside of it that when spun around in this thing will then make it look like, will make it an animation as it is looking like it is continuously moving.
Next up, we'll talk about the different types of animation. However, before we go into this, I want to ask you a question. How many different types of animation do you think there are? Right now, there are usually 9 modern types of animation that will help make the animation. However, in our speech, we're going to talk about 3 types: 3D animation, 2D animation, and drawing animation. Back in the olden times, drawing animation was one of the most commonly used animations because they didn't have very much technology to help create their animation. Drawing animations were used in films such as Snow White and Cinderella, and one of the very many Disney films that were created early. People use drawing animation by drawing things at different frame rates. However, before I explain to you how drawing animation is used, I want you to imagine that you are an animator and you are assigned to create a drawing animation. What techniques would you use to create this animation? The technique to create drawing animation is called onion skinning. This is where a light or a source of light will be placed underneath the drawing, and the drawer will draw the animation and rotate the image or add a new image on top of it and trace the original image. This helps create the frame rates, make it more naturally to the human eye, so it looks more congruent and more with the flow of the animation. Now, one of the ways drawing animation is used is called note card animation. Note card animation is where it's just like onion skinning. They use different note cards on top of each other and trace the original outline to create an animation which looks realistic. Here's an example. As you can see in this animation, they use onion skinning technique, which has multiple cards and helped create the animation look more realistic and more 2D. Next up, we have 2D animation.
Now, 2D animation is the process of creating drawings in a 2-dimensional space. Characters, backgrounds, as well as the space used in these drawings are all flat. Many TV shows and examples of 2D animations are The Simpsons, Family Guy, and Rick and Morty. Now, many people use 2D animation because it is one of the easiest types of animation to use. Instead of having to redraw these animations like traditional animation has to do, 2D animation can move individual parts of the animation without messing up its composition. Now, here is an example of a 2D animation. So it uses images of ones and images of twos, and as you can see, each image changes slightly different, like as this man's arm is the stick man's arm is going out more further each time in each image. Now, if you were to only show the twos, it would look a lot more choppy and different. 2D animation is used way less frequently nowadays than 3D animation, which Natalie will now be speaking about.
So 3D animation, like Giuliano said, is what is more commonly used nowadays. 3D animation is almost like using a puppet. It's almost similar to 2D, except it's a 3-dimensional field. In 3D animation, the animations are not flat. They are more lifelike and they have a lot more depth to them. A common technique used in 3D animation is keyframing. Keyframing is when you choose start and stop points for an animation, and a computer or an animating program will finish out the middle parts of the animation for you. That way, the animator does not have to redraw each frame rate several times over and over again. Unlike in 2D, where every drawing is flat, 3D is seen in a 360 view. That means the animator has to be aware of the drawing at all times, because it's not still and flat like in 2D animation.
In this photo, you can see a clear difference between 2D animation and 3D animation. We have a photo of Elsa from Frozen, and in the 2D animation, her features are flat and more one solid color. You can see her skin tone is portrayed by two different colors, and such things as like the sequins on her dress are flat and not as noticeable. Her hair seems flat and only has a couple of strands, which is flat and makes it on a two-dimensional surface. However, on this photo, we have 3D. 3D is a lot more realistic, and it helps portray physical features better. You can see her hair looks more human-like because each strand of her hair is animated. The sequins on her dress seem to pop out more and seem to have more of a visual effect. And the background also seems to come out of the screen as well, as it shows the ice walls behind her. You can also clearly see the defined curves of her skin and where the light bounces on and off on her skin. Finally, to conclude our speech, we have a question. What do you think the easiest type of animation is and why?
Lastly, we'll show you guys an animation that we made ourselves.
Now, to conclude, so far we have talked about how animation works, how frame rate works, the brief history of animation, and a few different types of animation that are commonly used in our world. Now, animation is a very big thing in our world, and many people use it a lot for watching and using, which will keep going on and coming forward in the future.
So 2D animation and 3D animation are very much commonly used, and hopefully in the future 3D animation will become more popular, and hopefully people can create a new type of animation that's different and better than 3D animation, maybe even making the characters look even more human-like.
Thank you for listening to our speech.
Thank you.